Hi again, everyone. Let me give you a little background about myself. I grew up in a typical evangelical Christian home in the 1960s and the 1970s. We weren't taught anything about the Sabbath, or very little about it. My siblings and I were encouraged to read our Bibles, and we did. We never really questioned the Sabbath day. Not even Sunday was really a rest day in our household. It was just a day to go to church, to do church services, to sing songs, to maybe eat a slightly better meal, but it wasn't regarded as rest day. One could do work on it, nobody cared. Even the concept of resting one day in a seven wasn't drummed into our heads. It was essentially the no Sabbath view of the Sabbath, which is very popular in evangelical Christianity. One day, when I had graduated from high school, and I was attending college courses, calculus course at the University of California, to complete requirements for entering the university, I met a Seventh-day Adventist gal on the bus that I took to the university to go to the class. And she confronted me about the Sabbath. So I told her I would go look it up and research it. So I did. One Saturday I went and I researched the Sabbath. And after that I realized that what the commandment was. I started keeping the Sabbath. My parents were not happy with this decision. They thought that keeping the Sabbath was apostasy. They treated me like I was apostatizing. They put the maximum pressure on me. They called people in to try to reason with me. When one of the first texts that they hit me with was Colossians 2:16, which is what I want to discuss today. I've already done a video on Colossians 2:16. That was about 4 years ago. But there's been new developments in the Messianic community since then, particularly the Aramaic primacy movement, and I made my video from the standpoint of the Greek text. What I want to do today is show that my translation of Colossians 2:16 is also in agreement with the ancient Syriac text, also known as Aramaic. Aramaic is a general term for the Aramaic language. Syriac describes the phase of the language between the 3rd and 6th centuries AD. Syriac is regarded by some as a form of Hebrew. Actually, it's another dialect of Semitic language, and it has a very large vocabulary overlap and even syntax and verb form overlap with the Hebrew language. So what I want to show today is that the Good News of Messiah translation that I have produced from the Greek agrees very well with the Aramaic text. What I want to show today is that these Aramaic translations, while they are claiming to translate the Aramaic text, they don't actually do so. They actually insert church tradition, or they follow church precedent and the word choices they make, and they end up with the translation that really cannot be used to defend the Sabbath. So what I want to demonstrate is that the Good News of Messiah translation is actually much closer to the Aramaic, being a translation from the Greek, than any of the other English translations produced, including all of those Aramaic translations which Aramaic translators claim reflect the Aramaic text. The fact is, this is a big lie. Those translations of Colossians 2:16 don't actually reflect the Aramaic text. Having produced my translation from the Greek text, I am somewhat disappointed that Aramaic primicists attack it for that reason, when they themselves have not produced translations that really agree with the Aramaic text. The reason my translation agrees with the Aramaic text so well, even though it was made from Greek, is that the Aramaic text was produced very literally from the Greek text in the first place. So what the Greek text says, the Aramaic text tends to say also. The situation is more or less like Christians that say, We believe the Bible. We believe the Bible literally. We believe everything in the Bible. But they actually don't believe what's in the Bible. They only say they believe what's in the Bible. Or like scholars that say, we've produced an accurate translation. We've given you the accurate Word of God in our translations. But then they proceed to mistranslate the Word of God. They don't actually translate it accurately. They only say they translate it, hoping that no one will check them out. And generally, nobody does check them out. The Aramaic translators are the same way. Nobody checks them out, and they produce translations in accord with tradition, which would prove nothing. You really can't use their translations as proper apologetic for defending Torah or Sabbath observance. The Aramaic primacy movement should be compared to the King James only movement, or King James onlyism. So the Aramaic primacy movement basically claims for the Aramaic language that it is the one original language that Yeshua spoke. In fact, it is not. It's a dialect that developed between the 3rd and 6th centuries AD, and it actually conjugates verbs differently than the Aramaic spoken in the 1st century by Yeshua. Now we're going to use some modern tools and techniques that have come on the internet since then to show what the accurate translation of Colossians 2:16 is. Okay, I've created a little interlinear for Colossians 2:16 here, Aramaic, Greek, and English. There are 2 lines representing the Aramaic. This is what the Syriac script looks like here, and this is the same thing transliterated into standard Hebrew characters. Makes it a little easier for people who know Hebrew to read the Syriac or the Aramaic. So this is the same here. This is Lamed Aleph in Syriac script, and this is Lamed Aleph in standard Hebrew characters. The Aramaic reads from right to left in this direction like this. This is the same text with a different font. Reads the same direction here. This English line literally translates the Aramaic. So this line, translation of the words in this line. This line is the translation of the words in this line. This line is how I rendered it in the Good News of Messiah. This one and this one here. This line represents the Greek text from Nestle Aland. This line and this line. Okay, what I want to do now is read Colossians 2:16 in the regular English order from the Good News of Messiah. Here's the Good News of Messiah. Colossians 2:16. Therefore let no one be judging you in eating and in drinking, either when partaking of a feast or new moon or Sabbaths. What you should have noticed in listening to this translation is that they were being judged for eating and drinking in festivals, new moons, and on Sabbath. Somebody was judging them for not fasting or not eating as they wanted to prescribe they should eat on the feast days. When Paul preached the good news in Colossae and in other cities, invariably he went first to the synagogue, and then he preached to the God-fearers who were attached to the synagogue also, and to proselytes. So the non-Jewish community attached to the Jewish community was closely associated together. There were Jews in the same city, and there were also converts to Yeshua Messiah in the same city from both among Jews and non-Jews. There were also many Jewish sects throughout the Roman Empire, scattered in Rome, in places like Asia Minor, down by the Dead Sea, and in Egypt. There were ascetic sects, libertine sects, Gnostic sects, all kinds of Jewish sects. In the Holy Land itself, there were the Essenes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Essenes were the ascetics. They advocated fasting, and many other Jews also advocated fasting on holy days. Those doing the judging were undoubtedly drawn from one of these sects who didn't like the fact that the believers felt free to eat and drink as they wished on the feast days and the Sabbaths and the new moon. Judging was in eating and drinking while participating or sharing in feast days, new moons, and Sabbaths. This was not a case of Jewish believers or Jewish Christians judging non-Jewish Christians for their non-observance of Sabbaths, new moons, and feast days. The persons doing the judging were unbelieving Jews or Jewish believers in Messiah who had adopted some of the opinions of some of the other heterodox Jewish sects, like the Gnostics, or some of the ascetic Jewish sects, or some of the rabbinic opinions, or some of those Jews who considered fasting on holy days a virtue and a display and a expression of piety. These were the persons who were doing the judging. The persons doing the judging were not Jewish believers who were conscientiously keeping the Sabbaths and holy days, who were judging non-Jews for not keeping those days. This was not the case. The judging was over matters that didn't pertain to Torah, matters outside of Torah, commandments and ordinances of men. If you look down in the context in Colossians a little bit further, you will see that Paul is not talking about Torah commandments. He's talking about the commandments of men. No one could call the Sabbaths or feast days or holy days the commandments of men. They were ordained by the Almighty. So we will see that the mainstream Christian church is completely in error in using this verse against those who keep the Sabbaths, feast days, or the new moons. So let's now look at the original languages more closely here and see how they bear out this meaning. Okay, from the standpoint of the Greek, we don't have to deal with not, that's pretty good. We don't have to question the word therefore, or tis translated anyone, not therefore anyone, you. We could probably update this one a little bit to clarify it. Okay, since it's plural, we can translate it you all, or more archaically it could be ye. Not therefore anyone, you all, let judge. This is a present imperative, so we could probably improve it by making it a little more transparently present. Let be judging. In regard to these words actually are an interpretation meant to slant the sense of the verse, and they don't really belong, so let's delete them. The word brosi means eating, so let's check that out here. Brosis, eating. They also have food here, but we'll see that eating is more proper. Eating, eating. One, the act of eating. So we'll update this to eating. We see here that the maker of this interlinear is so attached to church tradition that they're using an old version that has or in it when it's actually key here, which means and. Consult your Nestle Aland, you will see that the word should be and. So let's change that. All right, we got that. Again, over here, it's trying to be slanted to coordinate it with here, and we will see that this word does not mean regard. This translation is deceivingly stacked in favor of the church's tradition and in, so that's been fixed. Posis, drinking, drinking. There we go, drinking. Okay, we have a sequence of an Ida, 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 or Ada, 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 depending on which way you want to pronounce Kine Greek. So let's just look this up in Liddell, Scott, and Jones and see how it should be translated. Okay, we see that Ada, Ada should be translated either, dot, dot, or. So Ada, Ada translates either, or. So let's fix this. There we go. Either in regard. Now we're going to see that this mistranslation regard is a big deal. Let's check what the word means. Aha, a part, a share, a portion. To receive one's portion. A part, share, a portion. A part due or assigned to one. A part. Literally a part. Portion, share. You can see usage here. So let's fix that. Okay. Somebody was clearly incompetent here. So let's fix that. Should be of. Should put the indefinite article in front of portion. Okay, we put an indefinite article in there. Either in a portion of a feast, or a new moon, or Sabbaths. We don't have any corrections to make in the rest of the verse. Not therefore anyone you all let be judging in eating and in drinking, either in a portion of a feast or a new moon or Sabbath. So clearly, the judging is regarding the eating and the drinking, and the occasions on which the judging is taking place is during a feast, a new moon, or Sabbaths. So there were some ascetics who felt that these days should be kept with fasting or minimal eating and drinking. We know that Rome instituted fasting on Sabbaths in part of its history, and that some Jews also advocated fasting on the Sabbaths. The opinion that it was pagans that were doing the judging because Colossae is a long ways from Jerusalem doesn't make any sense. There were Jews everywhere in the Roman Empire, in Rome, which is farther away than Jerusalem, in Tarsus also, where Paul was from, and in the other cities of Asia Minor all have their Jewish populations and their Jewish sects. Probably it was one of the Gnostic or Essene-like Jewish sects that was preaching asceticism on the holy days. Okay, I just explained the Good News and Messiah translation here and the Greek from the online interlinear. We went through it and we corrected it. Highlight the key changes. Eating, drinking, that's not really controversial. In fact, nothing on this line is really controversial. There is a textual difference in the manuscripts between the King James and the more modern translations. King James translates from a Greek text that reads "ita" and translates "or" here instead. That slants the translation toward the mainstream church tradition. The cut key here in the text is in the Nestle land, judged by them to be original. And we see that in the Aramaic, indeed, it's a wa here. So it's the Aramaic text is reflecting a Greek text that agrees with key. The key words here are the first "ita" being translated "either," and then and Mary being translated "in part of" or "in part of a feast," "in a share of," or "while partaking in a feast." The word, that preposition "en" or "ba" here is often used in a temporal sense to mean when. Okay, and then the rest of the verse was not controversial. So we see that the way this conjunction is rendered here and this word makes all the difference in the world in the meaning of the translation. Now I would like to go through the Aramaic, and we're going to show that the Aramaic has the same meaning as the Greek. Okay, this is an interlinear literal translation for the Aramaic words. Anash could mean man. There's nothing really controversial about this. You can find all these definitions in the Aramaic dictionary. The sticking point again is this word, au. So we're gonna look up this word here in the Aramaic and see in J. Payne Smith, and we're going to see if it can indeed mean either. Actually, it can mean either, whether, or if, and any of those translations will work. If in a portion, in other words, it's giving a conditional, equivalent to the Hebrew im. Either would be subordinating, or whether. That will work too. So let's look up this word in J. Payne Smith. In the Syriac, the word is going to take this form, or it's going to look like this. Okay, here's the word in question in Payne Smith's Compendia Syriac Lexicon. Or, either. Either, or. If. So it can mean either or if. You see it can have the force of whether. So it agrees exactly with the Greek in being able to be translated as either, whether, or even if, which subordinates the clause of the holy days to the eating and the drinking. The issue was the eating and drinking. The holy days served as occasions for it. So we see that a proper translation of the Aramaic, either, or, if, no, or no, either. Okay, now I'm looking in the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon. It allows the word to be translated if, or a sequence would be whether or. We see that also can agree to the Greek. We can see that it could be equivalent to the Masoretic text im, which could mean if. So again, it surprises the conditional as to when the eating and the drinking takes place. You see that the word owl can be translated whether, if, or either, agreeing with the Greek translation they put in the Good News of Messiah, either. Now let's check this next word out here. In the portion, J. Payne Smith. That's from the J. Payne Smith. Okay, so let's check. I have when partaking. The meaning is essentially the same. In the portion of a feast, or one's share of the feast, or the new moon, or the sabbaths. In the festive eating, when partaking. Let's check out J. Payne Smith's Compendious Syriac Lexicon, and let's see if it has portion in it. You may as well look at the summary here in the Compendious, in the Comprehensive Aramaic Lexicon on the Hebrew Union College website. Portion. Okay, so now we're going to check the dictionary out. J. Payne Smith's Compendious Syriac Dictionary. You click on that. Here we go. Here's the word in question. The root is pelag, the same root as the word peleg. Means a part, to part something, or a part of something. The definition we want is right here. A portion, a fraction, which again agrees with the Greek. A share, or one's share in something. A portion. Here we are back at our interlinear in the portion of the feast when partaking of a feast. So the meaning is essentially the same. So we see that the Syriac agrees with the Greek here and also agrees with the Good News of Messiah translation. We see that the King James erred in following a corrupt Greek text here, translating or. You see that the translators erred in trying to translate this word with a circumlocution in regard to a feast, to put it on the same level as everything else. We see that they also erred in not giving a subordinating sense to the first Eta in the series here. I would say we've demonstrated that the Syriac actually agrees with the Greek and agrees with the Good News of Messiah. Okay, here's the Good News of Messiah. Therefore, let no one be judging you in eating and in drinking, either when partaking of a feast or new moon or Sabbaths. Good News of Messiah. And here's a reduction of our literal translation of the Aramaic. Here we go. Therefore, do not let someone make you all be troubled in the eating and in the drinking, whether in the portion of the feast or the head of the month or the Sabbaths. And we see that this literal from the Aramaic here has the same sense as the Good News of Messiah, just a different way of saying the same thing. Now we go down here to the other Aramaic translations, which say they translate from the Syriac. And we see that they do good in the first line here, a little rough with meat and drink, or in the distinctions of, and they don't really make sense here, this distinctions of festivals, when they could put the portion of a feast, and of new moons and of Sabbaths. So we see it errs right here. It does not agree. We see from Murdoch's translation, we've got the same problem. Distinctions of festivals, it's like they're following one another and choosing only one word to get the result that they want, an anti-Torah or an anti-law result. We see from George Lamsa here, from the Syriac, that he did better by putting eating and drinking. But then he again erred, put about the division of the feast days. And he put about over here, which colors the translation the wrong way, prevents subordination. He got this conjunction wrong. He did not actually follow the suggestion in the Aramaic lexicon to translate this whether or if. And he didn't translate this portion. So that too that agrees with the church tradition, and it's still anti-law. And of course, Lamsa wasn't pro-Torah in any sense. James Murdoch wasn't either, and John Etheridge wasn't either. And then finally we come to Andrew Roth's Aramaic English New Testament from the Syriac, and we see that Roth has the same problem. He's just followed suit from Murdoch and from Etheridge here. He's used the same word, distinctions of festivals and new moons and Shabbats. So he erred with the word or, just like the rest of them. And then he put in an additional interpretation here. He put the word pagan where it says no one. Actually, neither the Aramaic or the Greek means pagan. And then the footnote says, basically claims that there were no Jews or Jewish believers or in Colossae to be judging the believers, that they were all Gentiles there. That opinion doesn't make any sense. And also, Roth is not orthodox on the deity of Yeshua. One error goes with another. Okay, what I want to show here from J.P. Green's Greek-English interlinear is a case of eta, eta, eta being translated either or. So we have an eta here, translated either in revelation, another eta, or in knowledge, or in prophecy. So we have either or. So this is an example of the lexical pattern actually being applied to a text where we have eta n, just like in Colossians 2:16. And we see that they've applied it correctly here, but they don't apply it in Colossians 2:16. So this is what I call a proof by actual example of where they do the right thing elsewhere, but then if the passage should be influenced to be a pro-Torah opinion, they don't apply it. They cherry pick and they pick the translation or the word that gives them the desired result, an anti-law opinion. This is from 1 Corinthians 14, about verse 7, if you want to look it up. Over in the Side English translation, we see that it also implements either in revelation or in knowledge or in prophecy. So they just apply that in Colossians 2:16, either in part of a feast or a new moon or Sabbath. It would make sense. Okay, brothers and sisters, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I trust that I've well demonstrated that Colossians 2:16 can be translated in a pro-Torah fashion. It fits the context and the situation in Colossae, and that I've also demonstrated that the Aramaic text supports the translation as well as the Greek text. Thank you for listening.